Um, for those who don't know, DAN is a network of change makers in the Middle East, North Africa region. We're particularly interested on how to promote the digital transformation in the region through different channels. Could it be arts, technology, governance, health, education, all aspects of development through digital transformation. And we have the privilege today to kind of dig into the discussion about cities. How can we make our cities more open? How can we make them more smart? How can we make them more participatory? And we have the privilege today to exchange with two leading experts in the field. Reem Baouendi, who's from Tunisia and connected today from Montreal, Canada, and Eloïse Gabadou, who's connected from France. Eloïse has been working on the field after graduating in political science and economics from McGill University and UCL, University College London. She specialized in the sector of impact technology through her experience at the Liberté Living Lab. After a time as a communication officer within the ecosystem devoted to civic and social technology, she focuses now on open data and SaaS solutions applied to democracy, government transparency, and citizen engagement. She is passionate about finding the right way, basically, of incorporating citizen participation in the design of efficient public services or crucial public decision making at the city, regional, and the national level. Today, she is with the Open Source Politics, working with the free software Decidim, which I think we'll have the time to kind of learn more about the Decidim and her work with the Open Source Politics. She's a civic tech project manager, specialized in digital participatory processes and public innovation for institutions, NGOs, and private sector. Among the projects managed by Open Source Politics are the French Climate Citizen Assembly, very ambitious project that we will discuss today, the French Senate, and the National Assembly's e-petition platform. Also, the platform has been used in Decathlon, Aide et Action, City of Lille, Angers, Nanterre, and other ministries like the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Culture. Reem is passionate about building platform for the new century, the 21st century. Basically, platforms regarding to living, work, and learning. She's the founder and CEO of Medina Works, a boutique of design plus strategy consultancy. She's based in Montreal and Tunis. For over 15 years, Reem has been active on engaging in advancing green buildings and sustainable cities agenda globally at policy, planning, and design levels. She advised a wide range of public, private, and third sector organizations in the development sector of world class, including the US National Parks, the Abu Dhabi Urban Planning Council, and the World Green Building Council. Also, the private sector like Nokia, the Louvre, it's Abu Dhabi Louvre, Masdar, BMCE Bank in Morocco, etc. Reem is also an entrepreneurship ecosystem builder in Tunisia. She's the founder of Cogit, Tunisia's first co-working space, named by Forbes as one of the 10 best co-working spaces on Earth. A founding board member of Endeavor Tunisia, and has led the developments of BIAD Foundation's entrepreneurship support programs in Tunisia. Reem is a Think Fellow and holds a master's degree in building engineering from Concordia University, a civil engineering and urban planning degree from INSA Lyon, and a diploma in initial studies of architecture from School of Agriculture of Lyon. So basically, we can get the question both in English and French. I think I'm personally very excited to have this discussion with both Eloïse and Reem. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for the presentation as well.
You're welcome. So the first question that comes to mind when I was preparing for this exchange was this concept of open and smart city. And when you read the literature, you find like, I just found trouble just having one definition of this open smart city. It starts on the beginning, everybody starts like, well, open smart city is about smartness, it's about technology. So it's technology driven, like it's the premise that's like the digital and technology will change the world to a better place. But then we start having a different discussion about like, it's not only about smart city, but also about like the smart government. So the government has to be smart, and government has to use the tools of technology, but also to be smart on using these tools. And then we found like a third school that says not only it's about technology and the government, and in this case, local government, but also we need to think about the people, and the people need to be smart, and the people need to know what they need and how to use this technology to get there. So it's basically when we start looking at this open smart city, we start getting into the challenge just of the definition of how the multi-dimensionality of this problem. So how in your perspective, how do you define this open smart city, and what are the dimensions that drive really this movement forward? I don't know who you want to start. Eloïse, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So we're never going to find one definition of smart cities. It's too ambitious. There's many schools, as you said, and I'm going to defend one school, which is civic participation, which is how you understand smartness as not coming from a blind expenditure of technology, but rather on how you can actually integrate and analyze the information that is coming from citizen participation and other tools like opening more data and the feedback from the citizens. And basically, the one definition that is given by the French National Commission of Information Technologies and Liberties here in France, it's that smart cities is about improving the quality of life of urban dwellers by making the city more adaptive and efficient. But I added a little twist to that, which is you can only do that. So you can only make a city more adaptive and efficient by opening the construction of public services to the ecosystem of key actors that are going to be the main beneficiaries of this adaptive and more efficient city. So that's where I see a city that is said to be intelligent, or smart. It has to be smart in the way it processes the information that results from civic participation exercises and how it applies new technologies in an ecosystem of objects and services. So how it can apply technologies in a smart and feedback-based way, and not just by, comparing yourself with other cities, comparing yourself with other countries. It has to be based on local feedback and what is happening actually in your city.
Thank you. Reem, do you want to react to that?
No, I mean, absolutely. And I think we can just start by looking at what the city looks like, right? It's almost a series of layers. You have nature, you have buildings, you have the people in it, and the interaction that happens between. So smart cities or any solution is always a tool to optimize all that combination, all that dynamic that works together. So for buildings and public space, etc., and transport, if we can optimize the flows of resources that go through them and how we use them, solutions coming from smart cities can help with that. For people to live in the city and have a better quality of life, a better urban experience, by accessing information, being able to make decisions around them, etc., is important. But let's not also forget the planet, right? The planet is also, important, is dynamic. Okay, it doesn't probably.
So
I think the harmony between the three pillars is always very important when we think of about smart cities.
I want to ask a question that's every time I talk about this topic from my context, like in Morocco, I always get this question of, well, smart city is about innovation, so it's about like the the organization who can drive innovation. So it's like big firms, like big technology firms worldwide. They can bring really disruptive changes. Even the government, they'll be like, hey, we have all the data and we know what's best for citizens. So how can we have a good balance between, from one side, like innovation driven by those big firms, and from the other side, participatory approaches, bottom-up driven thinking? I know it's a big question to ask, but it's something that comes up in every single meeting of decision making.
It's a good question, and sorry, Reem, maybe you want to start. But so no, it's a good question, because basically what those comments answer to is the how. Like, how do we implement all of that? Like, we need partners, we need those people, we need big firms to put technologies in place. I'd say we need to take a step back into like, why do we need it? Like, which technology do we use? Is it something that we can create alternatives to, international companies? Because if you want to go out, find alternatives to GAFAM technologies, for example, do we want to create some technologies that are local based, which is something possible? So there's a whole conversation before actually implicating those like big firms. There's a whole conversation to have with the citizen, like, do we need that technology, and do we need that technology designed that way? Is it if it's an international technology firm, is it adapted to our local needs? Do we need to design a new service that is actually going to be more adapted to our local needs? So this is the conversation that needs to happen with the citizen, and then the how, that's where you maybe implicate those firms.
And I think a quick question there, Tarik, is also about the model for all this. Whatever version we bring, it has to sustain itself. It has to live and evolve. The citizen clearly are the closest point to the need or to what problem we want to solve. So we need to hear. The companies or private sector, usually they have the expertise to develop these solutions. Their input is important. The government can integrate at a much wider level and implement the solution at much bigger scale, which is important in a city.
Yeah.
One neighbor behavior is related to how we use energy, etc. So the question is not who should be involved. I think everybody needs to be involved, and the question is, how do we make everybody involved?
Exactly. And I think, sorry to add on to what you said, Rim, and I think that's the only way that the government has the legitimacy to do this. It's to unite this network of like multidisciplinary actors. And the most important people we often forget is the academics, like the researchers. They've been researching on mobility, on the best way, and they've been doing some research based on citizen needs and based on citizen, feedback and surveys, and that's something they've been doing for a while. So something that I had a conversation I had in Amman concerning basically smart cities was with researchers and the university there that was basically saying like we need to go by civic participation to actually like confirm the needs and find the perfect network behind it to put in place. So yeah, I agree with you, Rim.
Maybe we'll get into the details. Another bigger question that always gets asked is this even possible? Like, is this something is this a discussion specific for rich countries, and we are just dealing with like an academic discussion or theoretical discussion in the MENA region? So I would like us to start thinking beyond definition about like how this openness and participation can really accelerate the city transformations, and maybe share some cases, both of successes and or challenges that have been facing both in the region and like internationally, to see how much we can learn from each other. I know there are many examples, but like maybe like we just had a discussion, Eloïse, about like the latest example you had on about the climate change in France. Mm-hmm. Just tell us a little bit like how it was and how it was managed.
Yeah. So before starting on that case study, I just wanted to say I'm not going to be speaking about what you should do in the region, because I don't know enough about your region. So I just want to say that if there is someone to talk about either Morocco or Tunisia, I'll let Rim and Tarik talk about it. I don't feel legitimate enough to talk about the MENA region by itself, like locally. So that's why I'm going to talk about more like European examples, French examples that could potentially inspire you in doing that. So now that the transition is done. So the French Climate Assembly is something that started 9 months ago in France, where basically there was the whole crisis on the climate change that was becoming more and more urgent in the public eye. And they basically, the government agreed to organize a convention of citizens. So 150 randomly selected citizens were chosen based on their phone number, based on their gender, social background. There's 13 criteria. I don't know them by heart, sorry, but basically a lot of socio-demographic criteria. And basically their mission was for 9 months to draw some concrete public policies to be presented to the president and to work on that during some weekly sessions, basically, or every 3 week sessions. It was very ambitious in France. First of all, we didn't think that it was going to be accepted because it meant that basically the citizens had all the cards. So that was something that was pretty new. And after that, so they worked on 6 different topics. So mobility, work, the future of work, energy, consumption, and transversal. And basically what happened is that they, like last week, they presented their 150 proposals, public policies. And today, this is why we're mainly talking about it. Macron just accepted 98% of the 150 proposals. So that was a big deal as well today. The thing that's important for us here is that, first of all, time and logistic were invested in that participation. It's not, there's different levels of civic participation in a city. There's both the platforms that are like implemented for cities to do participatory budgeting. And that's something that does not require the citizen to know so much because it's really related to their first need. So what do we want in terms of environment in our area? Like it's very city-based or like even like area-based. And there's a second type of participation, which is deliberation, which is giving the adequate information, time, and logistics to the citizens for them to actually build an idea and build some kind of expertise over time with regards to like big problematics that are, the ones that are facing the climate change. So that was an interesting case study that just happened on open source politics side. We, on top of the in-person deliberation process that happened, there was an online platform that was deployed to host all the contributions from all over France and NGOs. And those two, the mix between in-person and online, were really designed for to feed into the in-person exercise and then suggest those proposals. So that was an interesting case study. I don't know if you have questions, Tarik, on that, basically.
Yeah, I what I love about these experiences is like I can feel that like we can start peer learning quickly from different experiences. I want to share an example that we worked on it on Tangier, and you've been part of this, Eloïse. You came to Tangier and helped us on this. Yeah. So what we did in the Tangier is a city in the north of Morocco, is we went to the city council and asked them, what are your priorities? And interestingly, they match what you're discussing. It's basically it's, energy consumption, it's mobility, those type of challenges that like now all big cities are facing. Yeah. And we basically organized an open space where we invited private sector, academia, and civil society, and asked them to propose solutions to those challenges asked by the city councils. And we collected recommendations from the participants, and this co-creation basically effort, we submitted those recommendations to the city council, who picked basically the ones that they thought are most feasible based on the budget and the political context, etc.
That's interesting.
they are implementing
Yeah.
this year. They are implementing this action plan. So it will be interesting to see how this kind of dynamics is starting now. That's happening all around the world. We are learning it here in Morocco to see how we can do the co-creation and the co-implementation. But we see that I think this type of event, this type of organization like Dan is an opportunity to cross learning and see how we can kind of learn from both successes and failures. Reem, I know like in different discussions, you have been working with other cities. Do you want to share like some of the examples that you think are relevant for the MENA region?
So this was obviously when we started talking about differences also across countries in the MENA region, but I think there's clearly like two big groups. One that is more, let's say, the higher income countries, mainly in the GCC, where they have been working for many years now on smart city solutions integrated to the city infrastructure. And here we talk more about the technology side. Being implemented. I mean, we saw it in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Riyadh, Qatar, and other places. We saw also experimentation because in these cities they've been working on creating new cities versus adapting to an existing city that was there. And when you have a new city, it's a bit like a place for experimentation, is a lab, right? Where you can do different things and see what works and what is the latest technology, etc. So example like Masdar and now Neom in Saudi and others, they're looking into, they've been looking and they are continuing to look into implementing the latest technology there. So that's also in these countries is where the investment is going. All the technology companies who want to sell their solutions are going there because there's somebody to buy those solutions. Whereas in the other countries, I don't think we have, we don't have the same level of income to be able to afford, first of all, these kind of technologies, which are important. I mean, think of like when you want to invest in public transport or, wastewater treatment infrastructure, even before the word smart was invented. It's always a question about that country is able to invest by itself, or do they need maybe some development agencies supporting them to do that? So this is kind of the two differences we have in the cities. And I don't think in the other countries we've seen much actually happening in terms of support to implement smart city solutions. I mean, there are some maybe exceptions in Jordan, you can see starting talking about it in Lebanon, etc., which made, especially in cities that tend to have much civil society, and we're seeing emergence of, the bottom up trying to come up with a solution and innovating because they see the problem firsthand and they think, okay, what can we do here to solve this problem or another? So, whether it's for mobility or for, food, access to food, education, etc., we're seeing a solution emerging. Thing is also that these kind of solutions will remain small because, again, it's not the level, the mean not the same. And what's interesting is that, okay, these kind of solutions that actually can work really well, how do we scale them? What kind of business model should we put in place? Yeah. How do we develop them further? And definitely we have, it's a tale of two cities a little bit in our region that is happening. And also what would be really even more interesting, when a solution happens in one place, how can we easily transfer it to another place? What kind of shared learning we have to create? How do we
be open source?
That's the key thing. I mean, again, the person who invented the toilet the first day, and it's a smart solution at the time, to solve a public hygiene problem. How do we have toilets everywhere? Same for public transport. And I think whether it's for civic participation or whether actually it's a physical solution to solve a resource efficiency, challenge, it's important for us to think about, okay, how do we get things to be deployed quickly also? Because time is of the essence also.
I think it's a good transition to present maybe a little bit Decidim and how we diffuse knowledge in Europe, which is knowledge technologies. So Decidim, the platform, the innovation tool that we use for participation is open source, and I'm going to present the benefits of the open source model based on Decidim. Today, so Decidim is a Spanish platform. It was built for Barcelona's municipal action plan. So that was a very local response to a very local need. And basically what happened in the year after that is that Decidim was published, its code was published on GitHub. And basically, it was more than published. There was a whole social contract around it. There was a whole documentation of the technology behind it so that it could be easily integrated in other cities and in other countries, basically. 4 years later, so now, it's a community in Europe that's basically using the same tool and developing the same tool, because it's basically mutualizing the investments in the tool. If there's a need for a certain feature to be deployed, for example, then it's going to be a shared decision. So what I'm saying here is that there are some technologies, if deployed in one city or in one country, if they're open source and well documented and also with a contract written behind it, diffusion can happen. Open source, like some people may be very skeptical because it was seen before as, you know, not as credible alternatives to actually like proprietary softwares, but they're now credible alternatives. And opening up codes is in the way of the transition we're living now, which is in a more collaborative economy. And basically, open source models are being criteria for public institutions here now in Europe. Like there's a conference on the future in Europe happening for the next 2 years. They needed an open source platform. And that's because it's both ethically and logistically interesting for a region to deploy open source tools.
Yeah, thanks, Eloïse. If you can share the link of Decidim to the public discussion. I'm looking at the question.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
But these kind of open platforms that are available also, I mean, one important element is that the data should be available and open also from the government side, right? Sure. So I think that's a key question also in our region, like to what extent we have access to the data to be able.
It was related. So Barcelona, on top of Decidim was one pillar of a great digital strategy they had in 2016. And I can share, I'm not gonna, no, anyway. They had like maybe 8 points to the digital strategy. I can find them quickly. It was, so it was opening up public procurement, which is something that's quite important as well. It was about creating an open and diversified pool of local experts. It was also about opening up softwares, and that's very important for smart cities, I guess. It's the idea of data commons, like the idea of opening up data so that it can be used transversely and across sectors based on, you know, converging needs in terms of like citizen needs, in terms of what kind of data can we have, what kind of convergent database we can have across institutions, basically, and sectors. So that's part of the response based on Barcelona.
I want to jump here and just come back to, because like we are aligned with some of the comments and questions we receive in the comments box. So the first one was from basically from Haidar, who's basically saying kind of like, I think what Reem was focusing on is like we need both a top-down approach and a bottom-up is not enough. So this question, like, how can we deal with those two approaches? Also, Mariam, I think, yeah, Mariam also asked, and I think it's a larger question, is how can we rate a city as smart? Is it like we can have many smart projects and solutions to different problems, but to rate it as smart, what are the indicators? Does it start with a policy, with a strategy? What is it? And then I think this is another comment from Hani, which is about the lack of data. And his question is about what's about the lack of access to data that is crucial for the different stages of planning, development, operating and maintaining smart cities. In many cases, the state has control over these data sources, and in some extreme cases, it is even forbidden to acquire such data. Grassroots, bottom-up organization can make the effort to collect data, but we usually end up with fragmented data set that covers smaller extents and can be hardly integrated to another one to the other. Maybe basically we just need to reflect on this data question, because at the end it is crucial foundation of this architecture we're discussing.
Yeah. To respond to Annie's last question, it's a problem everywhere. What we see here in France during the COVID crisis, it's that the government didn't respond rapidly enough, or just didn't feel the need to share some public data on the health crisis. So what happened is that, in complement of all of that, some local actors actually, as you said, collected the data, which was seen as a more legitimate source of data than the government at this point. So that was an interesting thing. In general, I guess the whole civic participation effort, if it's instigated by the public institution, then they have to be in a mentality of maybe providing some databases that can contribute to the specific need, to the specific decision making, etc. It's a pretty complicated thing to ask to opening up data, and I don't know if you have more experiences locally on data openness in the MENA region.
Look, I mean, it's this challenge, right? I mean, Tarik knows about this because he's involved in open data efforts as well. I mean, sometimes the data isn't there in the first place. It's not just a matter of access. So that's one of the biggest challenges. And I know we're past the discussion on definition, and even the definition we're deemed by smart, is it just about technology? I know we're in a conference that's more about digital transformation, but smart innovation, smart solutions can come without the technology also, and how we implement them. So I think that's why also when we talk about KPIs and how we measure smart cities, okay, there are frameworks available, like there's one framework called United for Smart and Sustainable Cities that the ITU developed, and has criteria about like what you need to have in place, and every time you have something you get points, etc. And that's how they establish ranking, etc. But then it's about performance, right? Again, smart cities is a tool for the city to achieve a certain goal. That goal is defined by the stakeholders involved in that particular city. So, tailoring your KPIs to that, if you are, say, in a water stressed country, well, having great solutions to optimize your water flows is important, right? Like in landscaping, in the homes, etc. And that becomes a priority. Whereas if you're like in other countries, maybe like Canada, where water is very available, you don't focus that much on that. So I think there are frameworks available, and how you use them and how you onboard them, it's really based on your objectives. I've been involved a little bit in the Saudi national policy for their cities. How we actually they take 2030 and distill that down at the level of city and explore what solutions, smart city solution, we can put in place to be able to achieve those goals. So I think it's linked to so many other aspects, and there's no straight answer and saying this is what you use.
Yeah, I want to add to this, and before that, I don't know, Amy, if you have the link to this ranking framework for sustainable and smart cities that you can share, if you find it. So in general, there is a lack of data policy, like a big architecture for data policy. However, there is progress on this, and I'm looking at countries like Jordan, Tunisia, and Morocco, who have basically have a law today of access to information law, of freedom of information. And basically, when you look at these laws, it does talk about proactive publication of data. Like looking at the examples of what's going on in Morocco and Tunisia, there is like a premise. They're starting to build a platform, publish some data. So it's kind of like it's kind of like these countries, when you compare them internationally, they are late, but the momentum is about to start. What's missing, the discussion that has been missing from this is, while yes, it's good to have the policy, we are not yet discussing the data ecosystem, like how much demand is there for that data to really flourish. We are at the data that's published, it's grossly like at the national level. We don't have much data at the local and hyper local level, because that type of data is most useful, is once you start having local data. We were basically we are looking like the role of the private sector and civil society and the academia is still not set up and confirmed on this data ecosystem. So while I think there is an awareness that data is definitely the oil of this transformation, we don't have enough oil there to make it really confirmed and successful.
And I'd say it's not really the oil, but the fuel, in the sense that it
renewable.
It fuels into a strategy and it helps towards something. It's not a goal in itself. It just feeds into a whole strategy. I don't know if Tarik, you want to answer to the latest question?
So I have a question about like the development, the relationship. I'm having one last question here that I want to share with you. I don't know if we see the same question. So the question is, do you think smart cities are the realistic pathway for development for countries where participation is maybe rare and sometimes undesirable? Does smart city become just rather just about the technology and much less about co-creation?
So basically, here's the thing. I mean, I was lucky here to be involved in Montreal in a kind of multi-stakeholder process for defining the approach of the city to smart cities. The government of Canada, so the federal government, offered big funding opportunities for different municipalities and cities to start working on smart cities. And what the Ville de Montréal here, the city of Montreal, did is that they brought many stakeholders, citizens, companies, startups, civil society actors, etc., to actually think, what does it mean for us, smart cities? And it was really interesting. I was in that event, I think, for maybe 3 hours. I don't think anybody used the word smart. They talked about innovative, inclusive, participatory, etc. Because, it's all about the solutions. Technology is just a way to get us, one way to get us to the solution. But there are many, many other processes to it. So that's why when we, these questions around, the different strategies in different countries, participation is very important. That's the most important thing, probably, having multi-stakeholder participation. The layer of data and technology and all that comes, to kind of exactly the fuel that will get the fire, started. So it's crucial, we can think of the very simplified definition of smart cities as just technology. So the same way you think I need trains to make people go on public transport or buses, and therefore I need meters to optimize my water system or energy. Okay, that's fine. That's simple infrastructure. Any urban planners, they will always use the latest technology for that. But we need to think about, kind of how can we do that even better and closer to the need of the citizens and the communities within it. That's the key thing. And to do that, they're the expert. The citizen is the expert. You need to develop better solutions.
So I want to push this question a little bit further and kind of, can smart city have a counter effect to participation by like the government's coming and telling you, hey, we're going to do the smart solution that has been applied in Montreal and Barcelona and all this with Cisco and Google and Microsoft all together and providing you guys don't need to understand this. This is too advanced for you. And somehow we shut down participation.
It's very like intimidating. It's very like they're doing their own thing again. The government is doing his own thing again. And I'm just, again, not even going to question it. I'm just going to live my life daily, and that's not going to change anything. So this would be counterintuitive, like, because you're basically saying, I'm going to design a city without involving the city dwellers. You're basically doing that. And that's, for me, how you can create frustration, how you can make public expenditure blindly, how you can be, not very strategic in terms of which technology you use if you want to use technology. And that's a good point. Like, if the answer is technology, then it's a good thing. But the answer can be just being, deploying another service that's not based on technology, but more information. Like, there's different ways of doing it. And so it's answering as well Abderrahim's question, which is, can we say that public inclusion participation can facilitate the sustainability of smart cities? Yes, it does. Because if you think in very, like, if you're like a public decision maker, and you're basically, or you're a mayor, or you're, taking care of the mobility questions, and you want to deploy a new service or a new product, what do you do? Like, the first agile method you want to do to be both agile and like ensure frugality, and like ensure the not like, you want to be at least a bit more strategic in terms of public service design, then you're going to include at the right of the beginning the citizen, so that you can work in an iteration method with the citizen feedback. And this is in terms of only like a cold public service management design. You basically, like, once you think about putting, and that's how you define your KPIs as well. Like, you can only define your KPIs if you actually have the citizen feedback on what the need is at first. I remember in Oman, the first thing that was raised was the problem of public transport and like the mobility in Oman. So we digged into it, and we were getting way more specific in terms of what do we need in terms of mobility. So this kind of thing is that you can have, as a government, a blind, or because you're surrounded by experts, but you can have a very far from citizens kind of ideas about what the need is for the citizens. But you can't know until you actually ask through different ways. It can be a platform like Decidim. It can be task forces locally. There's many ways to do it. I remember in Oman as well, there was a woman who was actually organizing in-person civic participation groups. And that's the kind of thing that's really interesting, is that's the kind of way you make your services and products sustainable, is by not creating frustration at the end, but implicating the citizen at the beginning. And to add on what you said, Rim, about the citizens are experts, there is an NYU teacher, and also who helped Barack Obama in his strategy, called Beth Simon-Novak, who actually wrote a book. I have it right here. Sorry.
Smart People, Smart Societies.
Yeah, I have it right here. Oh, sorry, I'm going to do a little promotion for the book. So you wanted that to be friendly, Tarik. I'm doing it friendly way. So this is like Smart Citizens, Smarter States. So basically, it's I recommend it because it explains basically how there's a difference between experts and professionals. Like, a professional is someone that works in public service and has done studies, has a background for public service management and design. An expert, in her sense, is a citizen who actually knows like their daily lives needs and who can actually contribute to that. I'll share the link to that book because it's very good.
I wanna continue on this, and Abderrahim asks another question, a related question, is like, has this Tangier City Council started implementing some of the recommended projects? And it goes back to the reality of things. So the reality is, like, yes, we all agree, at least in Morocco, that civic participation is a big thing. But then the challenge we are having is the trust. So there is the trust of citizens, civil society with the government, and saying, hey, we don't trust them, they're just gonna politicize the whole thing, and vice versa. So like the government looks at civil society as a different type of opposition that's basically just trying to shut them down in a way. So basically what we have been doing in Tangier and in other cities is like, how can we rebuild the trust between these two sides? And basically after we submitted the recommendations and we agreed on an action plan, an annual action plan, and we set up a monthly meeting, kind of a monitoring and evaluation meeting with the city council as civil society, where we just say, hey, how are we doing? What has been implemented? What's blocking, etc. And that meeting, as such, was a way to kind of build this trust and dialogue, and sets up a kind of a process for participation to go beyond just like an event or a cosmetic event that just say check on the box, we had the event, it's done. But rather we are sharing the responsibility of making this city smart, and we will work together on it, and we will work on our side as civil society to make you successful. Another example that where we did the same methodology was beyond the city of Tangier. We went to a small rural basically community. It's an Irzan. It's like a small village close to Safro in middle of Morocco. And basically we had the same process. So we said, let's do the co-creation and to say what would be a smart village in that case. And after basically like a day of dialogue, we ended up, what we need is a website, because nobody knows about it. So there is no, and when we want to promote rural tourism, and we need basically a building to make it like kind of a hostel for tourists, etc. So in a way, we just need to start the process, and we are at the beginning, and we just need to have the first iteration that is successful, and slowly strengthen this dialogue to build the architecture of the work. That's what we are today in Morocco, both in Tangier and Irzan.
And I think this citizen participation or stakeholder participation in general, like it has to be well thought of. Who do we want to involve? Who needs to be there? It has to be inclusive and diverse, like different points of view. The more diversity you get, the better solutions will come up. On the side, I do a lot of events like this, thinking about innovation with kids, 7 to 12 years old.
Yeah.
And we think about what's the future of mobility, what is the future of our cities, of waste management, etc. And it's amazing the empathy those young citizens have, and on how they approach the problem, and how creative they are on how we can come up with a solution. So it's very important to include diversity in the thinking process as well.
And for your question of trust, and I think it's one of the most important questions. There's right now we're working with the city of New York to see who is how to reach basically marginalized communities. So who is the hardest person to reach for such participatory budget, and for right now, because it's for COVID-19 response. It's like emergency COVID-19 response, and we need to reach marginalized communities. That's only done by doing workshops of outreach mechanisms. Like we need to draft a real and concise and outreach mechanisms to actually reach the people that are closest to those citizens that are marginalized, and that live in maybe live in areas where internet is low or lacking. And basically, how do we reach to people that don't know, or just don't know how to use, or don't have access to technology? And that's another question, like that's happening locally. Like, how do we reach them, and how do we create trust? And that's through outreach mechanisms.
I want to jump on this. Sorry, Yarim, but I want to jump on this and switch a little bit the discussion to the learnings and challenges of the pandemic. We have been discussing just like the life that we had before the pandemic will remain the same, but the reality is things will change. I wonder if you can share experiences of models of participation or city development during the pandemic. What changed, their new tactics, any new challenges, any new opportunities that we identified during this period?
Yeah, go ahead, Rim.
So the pandemic brought something interesting, actually, where the broader question about all the things we need in a city and how we shape the city, etc., came down to the most basic stuff. The first layer of the Maslow pyramid, right? How do I access to food? How I ensure that kids go and get educated? how do I ensure everybody's healthy and safe, right? So it boiled down to this everywhere. I think it's something we're seeing everywhere. So in Tunisia, obviously, I've been following quite a bit there. The mobilization of every category of what makes our society was quite interesting. Everybody wanted to help. Everyone were trying to figure out how to do it. At the beginning, everyone is doing his own thing, and then all of a sudden we start seeing like a new solution, trying to bring a better way of doing it, or a bit more efficient. So one example would be, for example, helping our hospitals and our healthcare system be to the right level. First thing everybody thought about, okay, so we need to offer donation money, right? As much as possible to ensure that the hospital buy the supplies and they to do. So we set up a fund, that fund, individuals and companies fed money into it. Then we saw other ways of doing it, like it's hospital driven, like specific needs, a list of things we need, and this is how you do it, etc. So there were like different iterations basically to that particular process, and there are some very organized professional platforming. For example, sbitar.org is kind of varies young people from the innovation ecosystem in Tunisia and also abroad who created a team together and worked on this platform that really mapped out all stakeholders and the different processes in place to make this donation process as efficient as possible. So that kind of, we saw it in the health sector, but then when it comes to food, we saw basically two ways of civil society and government aid as well, of course, but also the startups moving up very quickly. So e-commerce developed, really rapidly. So the pandemic really created this acceleration effect of a digital transformation in the country in many ways. So the e-commerce is a good illustration for that. Public service also started implementing solutions that we've been hearing about for years, and all of a sudden, in 2 weeks, we can actually do it. And this was specifically on how to distribute financial aids to those in need. So mobile payment, e-payment now is available, and it was done, everything, the technology and the legal and every aspect of it in 2 weeks, and they were able to serve, 300,000 people or more. So that acceleration was really to see. Education was another hot topic. Obviously, everybody's worried about their kids continuing their schooling for this particular year, university level or secondary or primary level. If for your university specifically, proposal to obviously to go online, and obviously many students don't have access to a computer or internet, etc. So another wave of solidarity happened there. And one particular platform called Sharik.tn was put in place basically to collect donations of old tablets and computers, refurbish them very quickly and redistribute them to students to be able to continue their education. So that's another kind of way of an existing startup, an initiative on the side that is more socially driven and more impact driven to help solve that problem. And we saw also that some startups already had solutions that were already there, but now their deployment makes more sense, and therefore their business opportunity develops. So an example, we have a company, Innova Robotics in Tunisia, that develops security robots. We've been hearing about it, and they've been selling in many countries around the world. But I think it's probably the first time I see their solutions implemented by the ministry in Tunisia to use robots, basically officers and people, and interact with them. It was quite interesting to see that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with your first point. My main takeaway is that it got really into you can talk about anything for a smart city, like creating hyper complex participatory processes, deliberation processes, etc. But what happened during the COVID crisis is that the citizen and the public institutions were just wanting basic information and basic organization of solidarity locally. And that's what happened. Basically, our platforms that were already deployed for civic participation went hyper local. It was to the area or to the streets. People are demanding help for, groceries or just taking them to hospitals. That was basically what happened to the day-to-day. It was very hyper local participation. Something that changed. We're one of the startups which deployed a lot during the COVID crisis, because people needed to be connected with their citizens in those times. So platforms, new cities asked us for participation. Something really interesting is that a network, one of the networks that is taking care of so it's called the Federation of Solidarity Actors. They launched a platform to actually tell the stories of the people that were the most hit by the crisis. So the people that were homeless, the people that had poverty issues, and all. So what they did, instead of organizing solidarity, they put in light some experiences that was sometimes forgotten because of the COVID crisis. So they were putting in light people that were in marginalized communities that had problems with poverty, that were homeless again. So that was a really interesting use of the platform during the COVID. Something else that was a bit annoying in France, it's that everyone wanted to project after the COVID crisis. Everyone wanted to create this world after COVID. Which would be a world perfect in terms of public service design, in terms of everything would be basically perfect after the COVID, because we saw that it was also accelerating a lot of processes. So as you said, it was accelerating a lot of processes in terms of digitalization and participatory processes as well. So what happened is that 66 parliamentaries, so elected officials, deployed a platform dedicated to the world after, or the day after. And basically it was a huge success. Everyone, I don't know, there was more than 15,000 participants just publishing about what they wanted for the future of France, which was interesting. I don't know what the follow-up is going to be. I know that there's a synthesis that was done every 6 weeks with the proposals that were really well described, etc. Now the 66 parliamentaries actually created a political group. So maybe they did it as their own political decision. So it was a good way to do their program. But so that's what happened, is the need for projection as well with that platform. And yeah, I don't know if Tarik, you wanna add something?
Yeah, I mean, those experiences are really rich, and feel free to add those links so everybody kind of into them. I want to share a personal experience during the COVID, where in my organization, Impacts for Development, we asked ourselves, what is the role now of civil society during the crisis, and basically what is participation in this context. And basically we looked back and we started learning from different crisis experiences. Think of them like civil wars, earthquakes, floods. And then basically, when you look at this context, you start identifying that the crisis, or overcoming the crisis, is a shared responsibility. It's not basically the government has to solve it and civil society has to sit back and just do the accountability mechanism, but really be part of the solution. So what we did back then, we started an online platform. We called this Mubadalat, which means initiatives. And we partnered with two leading universities, which is University Mohammed VI and University Al Akhawain in Morocco. And the idea here is basically it's kind of the role of research and academia becomes really clear. While in the classical context, we talk about civil society as just NGOs, but now civil society also has to be complemented by the force of research and innovation. And basically we just said, okay, as civil society, as citizens, what can we do? And we had a formula for ideation. We asked citizens to basically submit ideas of what can be done. We start collecting or monitoring, we built a catalog of different initiatives and innovations on the field. And we also kind of launched some open challenges. We tell them this is the problem that exists. what solutions can we have to those challenges. And interestingly, on the period of 2 months, we found like there's 4 fields that have been very kind of visible and demanded. One was health. So there were initiatives from civil society and academia to build kind of 3D printing of masks, of ventilators. And what happened after 2 weeks of building them, the government adopted this model and kind of partnered with private sectors to build masks and produce them at a larger scale. The second was education. So what is education during this time? How can we make distance education successful? And there are a lot of challenges there with like getting to vulnerable zones and vulnerable population, etc. Third one, as Rim said, is social solidarity. Basically, how can we help the vulnerable, both with food and financial support? There was another interesting topic that was kind of very clear, was fake media and how can we strengthen the role of media in general. And then a fifth topic that's today is becoming the topic is how can we rebuild the economy? How can we have a resilient economy? And we see kind of new businesses showing up, like that's kind of like a social business kind of a new type of community. It's kind of like, for us, one of the conclusions that we are identifying is like, when we talk about participation, it's not only like being kind of asking to be part of the solution, but also being innovation. And that does not need to have the government in front of you. Just for you as society, as academia, you can be a force just by being innovative and being a strength as such.
Yeah,
and I think that we can, we will take with us moving forward on this participatory model in the future.
I think that's a great point, because innovation is too much centralized. It's too much given in the hands of the government, which is the the government is a good actor to solicitate a network and to organize a network of people that can actually work towards innovation. But there's something that's really crucial, and you just said it. It's the fact that academia, and that's the demands we're having today, is from universities. Universities that want to create also participatory budgeting in universities, but also NGOs that actually want a platform to organize better and then deploy services that are more innovative and closer to the beneficiaries of the NGOs. So the things we're saying with I'm saying with citizen participation applies for all actors. And all the actors can instigate a citizen participation, like a participatory process. And it doesn't have to be in the hands of the government only. All actors can have organized citizen participation, and sometimes they're more legitimate to do so because they're closer to the citizens, and they have a more legitimate voice because there's this question of trust with the government. Maybe the government is not as trustworthy. There was something interesting about what you said, is that the government deployed for 24 hours during the COVID, like the French government, they deployed for 24 hours a portal for fake news. It was a total fail because no one was trusting or believing into a government-led fake news portal. So basically, it was just a failure, and that actually got replaced by an NGO who actually created also a portal for fake news. So sometimes some actors are more legitimate from the citizens' view than the government to do that kind of things.
And I think the other aspect, Tarik, COVID, is that this aspect of maybe like frugal innovation, like doing things very simply, very quickly, etc., and start somewhere. I think to me that's probably one of the most interesting learning.
Because you had to be strategic, you had to be frugal, you had to be quick, and basically that happened. Like a close friend of mine works he coaches for big firms, basically like firms that have been existing for 40 years in France. And he's coaching them into digital transformation. How can we, or even cultural transformation, how do we change the culture of a firm from within to accept more feedback from the employees? How do we, create that dynamic of citizen participation? We call it corporate democracy. How do we implement corporate democracy within a firm? And what he's been telling me is that in 2 weeks during the lockdown, people were like believing everything he said because it was the right thing to do, because it was the only thing, like the digital was the only response we had at that moment. So the digital transformation and the cultural transformation was accelerated from 2 weeks to like it was crazy. But
I want to add another lesson or another opportunity you identified during this crisis is like we tapped into a community that's normally very passive. You know, like I have been having this this frustration of like going to this participation event, and basically you find like the same people, like transparency guys, human rights people, like public services. And then during the COVID, we found a new community showing up, basically engineers, doctors, researchers, just by themselves, pro bono. They showing up, they want to be part of the solution. And it will be interesting to find kind of a formula, an architecture, where these people kind of continually engage on the developments of the cities.
Well, we've been talking about in France about organizing a French climate, French health assembly. Which would be basically like, you know, organizing the same dynamics, the same networks of health experts, engineers, academics, citizens, NGOs, etc., and also tech startups. So that also responds to Haba's question. How do you basically organize the whole network for a period of, you know, 6-8 months to renew how you do the health system in your city or country? And that's something we've been talking about doing assemblies, citizen assemblies with the right actors, both on health and on digital. That's something we're planning to do. Like a French elected official is suggesting doing a French assembly on technology, and that would be basically defining our politics for technology in France. Which technology do we want? So that's I think it's a good format. It has a lot of critics, but it's a good format.
I have a question from Hiba. Basically, I think it's something that has like we did not discuss much, which is she's asking, please tell us your opinion to the role of tech startups can play in tackling the civic participation challenge.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, open source politics is a tech startups. It really depends what you mean by tech startups and the civic participation challenge. It's quite large, but if I understand it well, we're basically we're a tech startup. We're deploying a tech platform for participation, and we help public institutions deploy them, both on the consulting side, on designing the participatory process online, and deploying the open source platform Decision. So that's how one tech startup can help. If you're talking about more like deep tech startup, that's more on maybe RIM's expertise, but I can only see it as, you know, another expert that you can bring in to inform the citizen for deliberation methods. So basically, if you have a health tech startups, that's part of the actors you want in the ecosystem surrounding the whole deliberation process. Yeah, I'll let maybe Rim add on to that.
I can add a little bit to that. So yeah, GovRights, I'm heading an organization called GovRights, which is also a tech startup. And there are, I mean, basically the way I look at it from business perspective, there is a clear demand for solutions. I mean, today there is a problem that everybody is complaining about, which is like there is this discomfort with the social contract. People don't trust the government don't trust citizens, and the development is not there yet, especially in our region. We look at like the indicators of development, we are lagging behind. So this is the problem space in a way, and there is the business opportunity, because if you have like a confirmed solution, there are clients for it. So both basically building, I'm just sharing some examples, building technologies for participation and deliberation, building solutions for data mining, text mining, and understanding what people are saying. Think of it like the sentiment analysis of what's going on in social media. There are demands for reusing the data to make successful open data. We need tech startups to reuse data, make business cases out of them. So in a way, the business sector is a piece of the puzzle that is so important to make this development and participation happen. And it's also, when we look at the region, we don't have many successes making like reuse of open data, many success of building platforms that have been confirmed in the region. And that could be from the technology side, but also it could be from the political context or the social awareness or other contexts. But there is a challenge and for tech startups to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And I think the question again is, for any solution we're proposing as part of smart cities, is the business model again is important. I mean, if you can create it within a startup infrastructure and be able to access funding, you know, private capital, VC or other, why not? You know, as long as you do the participation and you do the, you know, the governance kind of is clear also around the solution that are being developed. But I think we need solutions from everybody and involving experts, because when it comes to tech startups, usually they're expert, okay, in the technology of things, you know, and the data and all that. But also they can be expert in energy or in transport or in other things. And I think that's interesting. A combination of multidisciplinary teams, you know, bring you that kind of interesting mix to develop the solution. So it's crucial, I think. And again, sorry to cut it there, Eloïse, but many of these solutions that we're discussing, we're talking about processes on how to bring them to life, etc. You know, they take a lot of time. Startups can do things very quickly. They can do it in an agile way, adapt quickly. If we think about some challenges we have around our cities, environmental or social, etc., they are urgent. You know, time is of the essence. So having teams, regardless of where they come from, that can deploy very quickly and do it first frugal way and, you know, iterate and do the best, you know, one step at a time, it's so essential. I think we should not forget the dimension of time in all this, because we can discuss, you know, we can have processes for a long time, and at the end the solutions are just ideas, are not implemented, and that's a real issue. I think with smart cities we see it, we talk a lot about it, you know, go on Google, you'll see articles after articles, but if we can see what happened on the ground, you know, I don't think it matches the amount of talk, you know, we put and invest into it.
And there's two things I wanted to add with the role of so deep tech startups and tech startups. There's two things. So I think Rim, you co-founded a co-working space, right?
Yeah.
There's something happening in France which is like called the living lab movement, basically, and I'm sure you know this. It's living labs are basically places where you actually, so physical spaces where you unite the different kind of actors you want to unite to co-create services and products, and that's where it's called the places of, you know, experimentation, innovation, and so on. The role of living labs in France, especially the ones that knew how to connect deep tech, so researchers, deep tech actors, etc., to societal challenges and to, you know, to their actual impact. So how do you connect deep tech actors and energy to what their impact is for, you know, citizens and their energy consumption, etc.? That's where you create some local dynamics that are really interesting, because you have, with those kind of spaces, with those kind of living labs, you basically have an impact on the local dynamics of how solutions and services are being created. So that's one point. The second point that's happening in France is basically with that question of data and digitalization of governments as well. There's an initiative called the EIG. I'll send you the link. Which was an initiative that was initiated by one of the agencies of the government, and that basically for 1 year would integrate software engineer or like a data scientist within the public institutions. And those specialists, those experts, would be the ones that would turn the data that is very unreadable to something that is readable, or turn some very old paper files to digitalized files that could be then open data. So we were talking about the lack of data earlier. That's one way to do it. It's by instead of saying, I have the resources inside as a government, I'm going to take care of my own, like, you know, digitalization. I'm going to take care of opening up the data. there are some programs that are being done today to integrate some data scientists, some software engineers, etc., within institutions, so external ones, for a year, and actually instigate some kind of dynamic to go like towards opening data, etc., and opening data and making it readable, usable by the citizens. And I'll send you the link. Wait.
Yeah, I mean, Mariam is telling me I have 10 minutes left.
Oh.
So we really need to optimize our time. So I want to ask you one last question. Basically, I want us to reflect on the post-pandemic era, like post-COVID. How do we see this participation for smartness and basically some of the pillars that we have been thinking that may move forward, may change, may need to be adapted? Concept like openness and resilience of the cities, or the action plan needs to be more adaptive. I want us to think, like, how do we see, like, post-COVID, how do we see open smart cities after COVID?
So I think one of the elements for me, like I've been reflecting especially about, is that the activity can happen in a much smaller space, using much less resources, the in school and the workplace and the place of living, etc. And I think that's an interesting, like, especially if you think of in terms of impact on the planet, etc., and also accessibility, not needing the transport to go somewhere, etc. I think that's an element increasingly that emerge out of necessity as a solution. And obviously some people experience it differently from others. Not everybody felt the comfort of being at home. Others have much more space restrictions, etc. But I think, to me, like, thinking about what's the future of space, and particularly the home, a multi-platform, where we can do many activities, and how can that become part of the solution to climate change and to sustainability in general. I think it's an interesting place to dig deeper. And to think about how we can change, these homes that we've been doing the same way for years and years and years, and all of a sudden we're seeing new needs and new ways of new needs to experience them. So that's one element that I would love, particularly personally. I'm reflecting more on this aspect because I see.
I want to push on that, Reem. There was an initial question asked by Abdelrahim. Basically, he's asking that we should reflect on the relationship between openness and its relationship with the availability and management for space, as space can be an impetus, as it can be a hindrance to a quicker transformation towards smart cities.
I mean, yes and no, right? I mean, it's space again is another solution that we have in our cities. I mean, people could live without the space. Think of it, work outside space, etc. But the question is, how do we actually use that space in the best way possible? And the same way, how do we use the technology in the best way possible? So, if we take the COVID, what taught us is that now we have activities concentrated in much smaller space, and people using technology to be able to do more within that smaller space. And I think that's really an interesting way to start reflecting about what is the future of city when we take that as a starting point, right? Because we never think. I mean, humans tend to want, they're territorial. They want a space to sleep and a space to cook and a space to work and a space to learn and space for this and space for that and restaurants, etc. But then we never ask ourselves what's the most efficient way to use space to be able to do multiple things at the same time. So to me, that's smart. I mean, optimizing one resource, it's the essence of smartness. So anyway, so I think that's for me, that's an area that is really emerged as an interesting area to explore further.
Yeah, I agree. I don't. For me, the way we could go forward, and I think it's the main conclusion from this talk. It's how you organize deliberation. How you basically, we have to learn from what happened during the COVID, and sometimes, as you said, Rim, like participation was very, very like hyper local, very like based on primary needs, where to eat, how do we get help for doing that, etc. And that has been seen in the very hyper local way. But again, what's interesting is a city has big issues to tackle, right? It has, as you said, climate change, and climate change is transversal to all sectors, and that's what needs to be taken into account. And I think the way you organize deliberation methods in your city is the way that is really important. And especially that goes with really knowing your local actors, the local fabric of actors you have, really like knowing who is the easiest to reach, who is the hardest to reach, but is essential for the result we want to have on a specific topic. There needs to be a better, because an impression I had from my experience in Tanger in Morocco was that they weren't trusting their local actors enough, and I really wanted to like stress on that, stressing on like the fact that they needed to like trust their academic, trusting their the startups that are already deploying solutions. They were looking for international solutions where they had solutions in front of them. So sorry, I'm seeing all the green hearts on the left. Basically, yeah, I think it's pretty important to know how you want to create your deliberation methods locally, plus who do you want to reach for that.
I want to share 2 points, and I think those are open questions. I don't think I have answers. One about like the space management, and I'm thinking like we're having this internal discussion. What if this social distancing lasts, let's say, for 2, maybe 5 years? So the whole concept of like city and participation and all that has to readapt.
Yeah.
So we need like new architecture of buildings, new architecture of hospitals. We need new ways to do the queue. I mean, I love the term frugal innovation that is happening naturally, but we really need to get some knowledge and innovation on how to manage space based on social distancing. If that should be the case. And the second conclusion that we kind of learning is this learning what we call like deliberative democracy from one side, and the epistemic democracy, which is based on knowledge and innovation from the other side. Because we got the feeling that it's not a deception or disappointment, but like the classical players of participation have not been very active during the COVID. They were new type of communities. So like communities that were kind of promoting democracy and participation, basically were not very vocal. But we found like new communities of innovation and hospitals and stuff that's very active. So in a way, we need to find a model where both of them play their role effectively. And this is kind of a model that we did not build yet, because we have been for years talking about deliberation. We talked less about innovation as a piece of the puzzle. So in a way, we are learning during this crisis that we need like a model that we bring that is more inclusive to all these actors.
For sure.
Go ahead, unless you have a final point.
I was going to say, I don't know if we have time to answer. So I'm just going to say that we need to reinvent right now the ways today. The whole speech is about how do we complement online participation with in-person participation. That's something that's changing with the COVID. So there needs to be a whole approach to participation that's really interesting, and it is happening online. So it's about reinventing that as well. On that note, I'll just say thank you, because your questions were really, really interesting. And I think that was a really interesting conversation. And yeah, thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone in the Rakameya team, actually, for this interesting conversation. To you, Tarik and Eloïse, for helping me learn more new things also.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I really want to thank Mariam, who was doing all the magic behind the curtains, and maybe I'll give it to her like maybe a last word to invite everybody to the last session.
Yes, thank you everyone for this wonderful session. There was so much interaction. It was just interesting. I can see that we would be happy to keep it going. But I invite you to take all of this positive energy and join us in room 8, where we're going to celebrate the MENA Innovation Challenge winners, some really cool startups from the region. We're going to have a really interesting conversation with Tarik, a super cool entrepreneur, and some nice inspiration before we leave, and then we can finally say goodbye and thank you to all of you and celebrate the first ever Rakameya. Thank you for making this happen.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.